Hello and welcome to the final Christmas in July episode of First Dates and Soulmates. We are going to be reading an ARC novel. We're going to read a book called An Alien Mate for Christmas. Because Nikki and I were like, what is the gift that just keeps giving? It's lilac alien penises.
Yeah, the gift I didn't know I wanted, and it wasn't on my list, but here we are.
I mean, it's basically just the Justin Timberlake Dick in a Box Saturday Night Live special, isn't it?
It just happens to be purple and have some spots on it, apparently.
Did I just make you snarf? I think you... It's just a little bit of a spit take. Okay, so the book that we are doing a read-along of today is called, like I said, it's An Alien Mate for Christmas. It's written by Melody Beckett. It is a very short little Christmas novella. I love a Christmas novella because sometimes with Christmas stories, you just want something light and fluffy. You don't want to go too deep. So this one is 118 pages, meaning that Nikki read it in 5 minutes. We chose this.
Close enough.
Yeah, close enough. We found this book. We wanted to support another independent author based on our conversation last week about how to support indie authors. So we found an ARC of this book, an advanced reader copy of this book, which we downloaded from Booksprout. So if you are interested in, supporting more independent authors, writing reviews, talking about their work, I mean, maybe we can do a whole episode about this, about how to support, how to get into reading ARCs and writing reviews. But in this case, we just went to Booksprout and I looked up the word holiday and I sorted it by when are they going to be released. And the first one that came up was An Alien Mate for Christmas. And our next episode is going to be all about alien erotica. So this felt like a very natural transition to go from Christmas to aliens. When you only have, but this is July 31st. This is the bonus episode. So that was our thought. This book will be out by the time this airs. So this is releasing on July 23rd. If you want to go grab yourself a copy, we will link to that in the show notes. The short summary is that An Alien Mate for Christmas is a science fiction holiday romance set in the same universe as Melody's Taurine Warrior series. So if you end up falling in love with this particular we'll say species of alien, then you can go get 4 other books about this particular alien group. Here is the book blurb, the summary. He's one unexpected alien with 2 special presents just for me. Taking a shortcut through a sown circle after my car breaks down one Christmas Eve seems like a great idea, but instead of making it home safely, I collapse in the snow and black out. The last thing I expect is to wake up to a giant, purple, very naked alien man holding me in his arms and sniffing me? He is stuck here for the night, so I do the intergalactic neighborly thing and open my home to him. I didn't expect to fall into his arms again after he decorates my Christmas tree, but it feels like my stocking's extra stuffed when he reveals he's brought me not 1, but 2 special packages to enjoy. Earth isn't safe for him, though, and after tonight, he has to leave. There's only one problem. He's my mate, and I don't want to let him go. So, Nikki... Tell me your thoughts about An Alien Mate for Christmas by Melody Beckett.
So this is kind of fun. I like any type of book that does have like something unique in terms of their world building. And in this one, it is like the alien like species and their hierarchy and how that works. So the alien character, his real name is like Luck 456. Like he is the 456th luck of his line.
Of his lineage, yeah.
And they kind of his lineage and the lower your number, like the closest to the number 1, of higher stature you are. So the fact that he is 456 means like he's kind of a nobody. He has no rights within his society, which is called like the Nigerian Empire. I'm going to pronounce it that way. There's a lot of G's.
There's some extra G's, but I would have gone with Nigerian. I think you're right.
G's.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like, with his rank, like, he's not allowed to vote. He can't own property. He has limited health and education option. He sounds like an Earth woman in the 1970s through the 1990s. And there's all these things involving marking. So I always think like that's kind of cool when your initial character, or like the character who's kind of going through the most is actually like the male side of the story. Because he's kind of the fish out of water and they kind of switch who is the fish out of water at different times. But he's ultimately the one that's coming to Earth for this moment. So like that was kind of fun, in this very short glimpse we get of his culture and how he interacts with the other alien, Luck 8th, I think is the one who's captaining like,
Yeah.
the shuttle that he's
Like,
on.
he's the elite that is the pilot, even though he's less experienced because he has this higher rank.
Yeah, so I always find like societal structure kind of like an interesting entry into it. And then when you discover that this beautiful leopard alien man, as the main character describes him, yeah, he's got 2 peens.
2 peens. And I thought this was really interesting because we've read several books. I mean, not on the podcast, but you and I individually have read several books with multiple appendages. And I thought that the way that they did the 2 peens was very smart in this book, which is 1 peen for pleasure and 1 peen for procreation. I've never seen that before.
You know what? Again, from it, like, let's get into like this anthropological, scientific. Let's talk about the reproductive things. So again, we've talked about this on multiple episodes. I do not have the ability to visualize things at all. So, we joke about it in previous episodes. We joke about, are there Post-it notes full of stick figures in the interview we do with Rochelle that's coming out? My challenge with this story, like it is with a lot of them that lean more towards the erotica side, which I would say that this one does. It does have, it's 118 pages. A lot of that is on-page sex. Cool. We like it. But when I can't picture any of it, it does become, difficult for me to get through because I just end up skipping a lot of the description and just reading the dialogue. And when there's not a lot of dialogue, the book gets even shorter. But it was fun. It was cute. It was really short. It did make me curious about the rest of her books. So I'll probably go check those out at some point. But just, nice spotted leopard purple alien man. Meg, what about you? What'd you think?
I thought it was really well done for a novella. I actually kind of had a different experience to you of like, you were like, I want to know what's happening in the society. I'm really intrigued by that. And I was like, no, if he's about to be exiled from society, then I don't really like, I almost thought there was too much detail about his society if he was going to leave it. And I wanted more about her misery. Because
she's having a day.
She's having like a year, right? So the way that they describe it is our main character, our earthling, if you will, is Kitty. She lives in Dublin, Ireland, and she's having like a shitty ass year. So she was engaged, and then her fiance left her for her best friend, and still wants her to come to the wedding to support their relationship. And she works with both of them at this B&B, and the only reason she's staying in town is because she was staying for her grandmother, but Gran just passed away and she inherited her house. And so now she's in this phase of like, do I want to stay just for this house, even though it's empty and I'm alone? Or do I want to leave, but I don't have the money? God, I don't even have the money to fix my car. And I would need a car to leave. So how am I going to do this? And then as I read in the summary, her car breaks down. She has to walk home and she walks through one of these Irish stones. Kind of reminds me back of like going into Born in Ice.
A little bit,
How Grayson had like those stones that he was using for murder scenes in his book.
Yeah, the stone dances.
So she's walking through this and like, does she trip and fall? I sort of missed it, but she blacks out.
I think there is, she does trip and fall over what eventually turns out to be a teleportation device. Which again, aliens didn't make the pyramids. Aliens made the dancing stones, which are kind of like what Stonehenge, for example, is called a stone dance. This idea, they were like, okay, this is actually just an intergalactic teleportation device. The other thing with Kitty that I think is funny though is like they all work at the same hotel. Her fiance's family owns that B&B hotel thing. She's engaged to him. He cheats on her with her best friend. Her best friend is now pregnant. And they're all still working at this hotel that is owned by his family. And it's just like, you know what? You're right. She's having a day. And apparently her grandmother died and her fiance left her in the same month.
Can you imagine losing like your only family and then having your partner be like, I'm out. And then you still see him every day? Whew. Kitty, get out of town.
Here's my thing with like any stories. It doesn't necessarily have to be aliens, although it does kind of show up there more often. It happens sometimes in fantasy too. Basically anything where a character has to leave their world, like planet world, not like, oh, I'm leaving the big city for the country with a tree farm, but like have to leave their world. I always worry about the logistics on the back end of Well, what happens to, do people ever miss them? What happens to their social insurance number? What happens to their bank accounts? After what period of time do they sell the house and this person is declared legally dead? Is there a police investigation? So when Kitty goes through this, like, literal, there's teleportation, and obviously the alien man can't stay on Earth, and you know they go off and do their thing. My brain goes back to, does her feel like they do their best to set up that she's got no one to stay for.
Yeah.
So, you know, who will miss her? I think what I wanted, though, was for her to say to the cheating scum of a fiance and best friend, I am leaving, so that they wouldn't expect her at work the next day. It would just be like, she's gone. Because to me, that there's this open loop now on Earth of like, would nobody report her? And if she has ownership of her grand's house, like, who is following up to make sure she pays property taxes on that? Like, when does the house get repossessed?
I love that this is where your brain went. Like,
yes.
Always the logistics and operations. I feel like you are the person who would then like step in and be like, well, where was the last place that we saw her? And you would build the color-coded spreadsheet of like, where are Kitty's whereabouts and who saw her last? And oh God, her fiance went to her house on Christmas morning. Did he murder her?
So I love that you bring this up, because I've mentioned before, one of my favorite podcasts is I Hate It But I Love It, which is hosted by Jocelyn Getty and Kat Angus. And there is a runner that has been on for like the 7 years that show has been made and produced, that Kat is always wondering, but what about her social insurance number? So it's like when characters like, you know, The Mummy or Hocus Pocus, like when characters come forward, they're like, but what about their social insurance number? Like, they don't have one. How would they survive in this world? Because without a social insurance number, Social Security in the US, in Canada, social insurance number, like, you can't get a job, you can't get housing, you can't get credit, you can't get whatever. So like, that's always Kat's first question is, but what about their social insurance number?
I mean,
so that's kind of my question.
Let's be fair.
Like, what happens?
I'm gonna answer this for 7 years of podcast for them. Like, any undocumented immigrant can get a job without needing a social security number. So they might not get the best job. They might not work above the board, but they can get a job under the table. There are plenty. You walk into any restaurant and I bet you can get a job as a dishwasher. Okay.
And this turned into an immigration podcast. No, it's,
but like, and they should have rights.
Kind of wonder. So, there you go. We stand for.
I didn't want to seem anti-immigration. No, people should have rights, even if they're undocumented immigrants. Okay, they should be able to get a job.
There you go. But like, again, those are the things I kind of wonder about whenever someone goes into a different world. But they did set this up in that she's not leaving behind family that is going to miss her. She's essentially, her only family has died, and her fiance has left her for her best friend. And that best friend's a dick.
So. And I think that's like very important to the reason that the two of these characters connected so quickly, right? Because even though they're fated mates, and I sent you the screenshot from Melody Beckett's Instagram, where you know how people will do like the tropes where they view out the tropes. And the trope on this one was, I licked you, so you're mine. First time I've seen that as a trope listed, but I mean, that's basically what it was. Is he, you know, the insta-love of fated mates works really well in novella format because you don't have to overcome all the barriers. You don't have to get to know each other so well. You can be like, that's it, right? Like in like Cressley Cole's A Hunger Like No Other. He smells his mate and chews off his leg to go get her, right? Like the instinct is there, and you're willing to hurt yourself and you're willing to do anything. And it takes out, when you have a fated mate, it takes out a lot of the conflict and tension. Unless the other person is unrequited or they're nervous about it or they don't have that fated mate instinct. But by building that in, it makes it like a very clear, straightforward, you're my mate. I actually wish there'd been more of it. Because this is a dual POV. So you get Kitty and you get Luke 456, although he has chosen his name, and his name is John. So you get John,
white man Earth name.
I know. I was very surprised that if he was an Nagarian, wouldn't it be like something really interesting and unusual, not like one of the most common English names in history? But okay, that's a choice, right? And so John instantly knows that Kitty's his mate, doesn't want to scare him off, which is often the case in a fated mate romance. But then like, they're having sex and he's like, you're my mate. And she's like, okay.
Yeah. I sometimes wonder, like, and this is always fun in like paranormals when there is like a fated mate concept, but only one of the characters comes from the culture that recognizes that and knows what that is. Usually it's the male character is a shifter, or in this case, an alien,
Vampire.
where the concept of mates
Yep.
in their culture. And then like the human is like, what? I was like, maybe it was just because Kitty was having a day that she was like, oh, a mate? Cool. Yeah, I'm into it. Versus if she had like not just lost her grandmother and not just gone through everything, like how quickly that she's just like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm in. Let's go.
I also really liked, and I think this works really well in a novella format, that part of the world building was I took this teleportation device. It will reopen in one cycle, and then we don't know when it will reopen again. And so she knows that one cycle means one day, and therefore they have one day on Earth to decide what to do, and one day on Earth to see what happens between the two of them. And I liked that. And the day was Christmas Day, which, like, honestly, like, makes sense from a storytelling perspective, but also sort of makes sense from, like, it's pretty close to winter solstice, you know?
Yeah. If we're going to kind of bring in some like Earth pagan influences.
Right. Maybe they didn't really bring that up, but if you're going to be at a dancing stone, like, maybe we have a little bit of a pagan solstice rite happening here. So that's how I would read into it. But
but you know, it is kind of funny. But can you imagine being someone arriving into, in this case, Earth, celebrating Christmas? Like, wouldn't that just be the weirdest thing to arrive to?
I mean, I think
like we decorate trees and we sing and we do, like, if you knew nothing about Christmas and were put into a place to celebrate, I just think that would be the weirdest thing.
Well, no, I think, but yes, I agree with you. But also, like, there was not a lot of Christmas festivity. It's not like she dressed him up in her grandfather's old hat and took him downtown to see the lights and the tree lighting and the, he was actually very hidden the entire. She was the only one that ever interacted with him. Which, if it had been a full blown novel, I would have been like, no, I want to see him going out into society and exploring with her and seeing her town. But I think in a full blown novel, spoiler alert, he would have stayed. I think that's how I would have written it, is he would have stayed and they would have figured it out and they would have gotten him a social security number and they would have, maybe it would have become a trans-dimensional society and other people could have come to the portal and gotten themselves their own very sexually satisfying aliens. Right? I think she even says at one point, like, if there were more aliens on this planet, then there wouldn't be women who don't have orgasms anymore. Like,
which, I'm here for this. I'm here for that vibe. The other thing I found interesting with this is he can't turn off, quote unquote, the alien. He's big and he's purple.
Yeah.
So, like, it's not like I'm reading one of Gray Bryan's new book. It involves someone summoning a demon. And that demon, of course, can look like the 7-foot-something demonic being that he is. But he can also, like, turn on a human look. Mm-hmm. So it's easy for him to be on Earth causing mischief as a demon. But John, the lavender alien, like, he can't turn. So I also think that's why the only one day on Earth, one cycle works really well. Because otherwise you would have to get into the additional logistics of how am I keeping him hidden? Like, is this going to be like a 3 kids in a trench coat situation where he's going to have to wear a hat? Actually, no, it's Christmas. They would dress him up as Santa. So he'd have a beard covering his face. He would have the red toque. He would have, like, the furry thing. And they'd be like, oh, Santa's just a little frostbitten. That's why his face is purple. Like,
she can put on some makeup and just cover the rest of it up because he already has silver hair. It's fine. He's just like an elf Santa. Oh, and another thing that they did that I thought was really interesting in terms of world building was, yes, he wasn't able to shapeshift and to create a human form, but he did have an implant that allowed him to understand English and speak English. And then even when they got on, and I thought this would be an issue, that, like, he understood her because she's his mate, but then when they got back to, the intergalactic place and they met back up with Luke 8, he wouldn't understand her, but he still did because for some reason human English or Earth English had been programmed into their translators. So it never became an issue. And again, if this were a full-blown novella, I'd be like, no, it would be more interesting in like an Ice Planet Barbarians kind of way where, like, they had to learn each other's language and they had to, like, do go back to Love Actually, where it's like bottle, chair, table. But like they would have to go through some of that conflict and that tension of we can't understand each other, we're attracted to each other, do we stay or do we go, is it worth it to put in the time to learn this language? But instead we got the the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy solution, which is, well, just install an implant and therefore they will speak the same language. And I think that both are good storytelling mechanisms depending on the story that you want to tell. But in this case it was like, okay, well, he doesn't look like everyone, but he and I can still have this conversation and I can teach him about my culture and heritage and give him a cup of tea and explain to him that this is something warm to drink. And like that took some of the angst out of the situation.
Yeah, I definitely think to your earlier point, like it's a novella. Like when a novella, it's really like you have to strip out as much conflict as possible. So you can't have something like it's a language barrier. You can't have something about we have to keep him physically hidden from prying eyes because he could be taken away as an experiment, a la the TV show Elf. Like, you kind of avoid all of that. And it's really just focused on which penis goes where. And then he's gone. Like, this is, let's go simplistic. It's very pared down.
Well, to your point, like novels have a bit more space to breathe and to explore and to say what would happen if, or if this doesn't work out, if there is this dramatic tension, how would that impact the outcomes? Versus novellas, and Christmas novellas exist for a reason because we want just like that burst of joy, can just be a fun story to tell without nearly as much pining and angst and everything like that. Things like, and that's why fated mates or insta love, that's why I think like tropes honestly work really well in novellas. Because you know what you're going to get. You walk in and you're like, oh, a snowed in novella? Yep, they're going to crash their car right away. And one of them's going to pick the other one up and he's going to be injured and she'll have to nurse him back to health. And then they're going to fall in love and then they're going to walk out. But they're the dog's going to have to go out to pee. And then some, like you feel a lot of what the story is going to be before you even open the book. So when it pays off, you're like, that was just what I needed. Novellas can do that for you.
It's almost like, it almost to me feels like novellas are the improv version of yes and.
I love that.
Right? It's like, her car broke down. Yes, and she has to walk. He needs to leave this planet. Yes, and it's like there is no because the path, just because of length of time, brevity of narrative, it has to pretty much drive beginning to end really quickly. So it always just has to be yes and on to the next thing. Yes, on to the next thing. Yes, you're my mate. No, like, well, you need to go to an insane asylum, or I do, because clearly I'm talking to a big lavender alien man with two penises. But it's very much like, there's an alien. Yes, and I'm going to take him home. He says you're your mate. Yes, and I accept this. You're going to have sex. Yes, and we're going to keep doing it. He's going to go off to his own planet. Yes, and I'm coming with you, right? There is no deviation. This whole thing is an improv game. Yes, and zip, zap, zop. We're going to your planet now, and I'm off of Earth. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And that actually, for something that did have a very straightforward plotline, it still surprised me when she left with him. Because every alien encounter romance that I have read has been the alien comes to Earth and the alien stays somehow. And so my expectation going into this was, and now I think that may have been part of the reason that in chapter 2, where we get the backstory about how he was rejected from society for his leopard spots or lack of leopard spots or whatever. I was like, this is too much detail for an alien arriving on Earth. Like, I didn't need that much of that, like, comfort zone pre-existing before he enters this inciting incident moment. But then the fact that they went back, I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm glad that I did have that. I just wasn't expecting it to be relevant. I was expecting it to be, he gets to Earth, the fiance comes into the house. She says, no, I'm not going to your wedding. Get out of here. And then I expected the alien to be like, you deserve better than that. Or I'm going to beat that guy up. Or, I expected there to be a bit more of a protective, possessive side of fated mates, which wasn't there. He was just like, well, that guy was a dick. And then he walked out and that was it. And Kitty stood up for herself.
It was very quick.
Yeah. Which is fine. But especially having set up, these are two loners who found each other and now they're going to build a life together. I expected it to be there, or they get in her car and he fixes her car and they get off and they drive off to, I don't know, Sligo or something where they can buy more land.
Yeah.
Or he can.
That's actually kind of fun because
no, go ahead.
You're right. Because it's usually if an alien comes to Earth, the alien finds out a way to stay. Because oftentimes, and in a lot of the slightly alien ones that I've read, where the alien comes and like takes the humans away, it's often against their will. So a large part of the storyline then becomes the alien the human who has been taken has to kind of forgive the alien for taking them. So like in the Star Marked Warriors series by Sam Burns and W.M. Fawkes, that's essentially what happens is an alien spaceship comes to Earth and takes a bunch of humans back to their planet. And this is like a several weeks long journey from what I remember of like they're on the spaceship and then they get to the planet. They're very much treated as second class citizens. And then it turns out there's a bunch of things like going on in the background. It's a really fun series. It is MM and it's super interesting. But yeah, like a big part of that is, even though all these humans end up with an alien, some of them there is like, I think one of the books is closer to an insta love because they had a horrific life on Earth. So anything was better. But for a lot of them, it's like, I was a barista and I didn't think I had the greatest life, but I did have a life. So fuck you for taking me away from it. So a lot of their plot line is just getting over that initial incident of you took me from my planet and admittedly not great place, but it was still mine. So that was kind of interesting when I guess Kitty, losing her this thing happening with her fiance was enough for her to go, yep, like let's go farm.
And she didn't even know where they were going. Planet. He didn't tell her anything besides like, I was trying to go to a different planet and I would have this farmland that I bought. And that was it. He didn't invite her. She just sort of went along for it. She said, "You're not leaving without me," which I thought was also an interesting choice, that he didn't give her this utopian or even dystopian view. It was, I will go where you go, which felt very Fated Mates, which felt very aligned with the trope that was a suggestion. I want to speak also to like alien abduction as something to overcome in a full-length novel or series through Ice Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon. So that one also starts with forced abduction. It is all women like Kitty that were specifically selected for not having family that would be concerned if they disappeared. None of them have deep families, deep roots, deep romantic relationships. They're all sort of loners, which makes for really interesting dynamics when then they have to get along moving on. So all of these women are picked up from, I'm assuming, North America. They're all mostly English speaking, and they're abducted by a predatory alien class. And then they work together on the spaceship to rise up and to form a coup and to take down the aliens that abducted them. And then they land on a planet that has more magnanimous alien life. So they still have the, here, this is not the choice that I made, but the abductors are not the ones that they are then going to end up with. It's this third party alien unit who, again, they don't speak English. They have very detailed, large anatomy. And so it's, and that's the interesting thing about the series too, is that it's these women who have landed on this planet that is mostly, but not exclusively, large, 8-foot tall, blue Ice Planet Barbarians. That's not, I can't remember what the name of the culture is, but that's the idea, is that they're on this ice planet. They're going to freeze to death if they don't tap into the existing culture and go into their caves, and then they start to pair off. But things, the pairing happens differently because some of them are fated mates insta love, and some of them, like one of them, she has an IUD that was installed on Earth, and like once the IUD gets pushed out of her body, then she falls in love, or then someone falls in love with her because the hormone resonance wasn't able to connect with the synthetic hormones being pushed into her system. What?
I was like, hormonal resonance is a term I've never heard, and honestly kind of grosses me out now that I think about it. I'm like, my hormonal resonance? I'm like, get your resonance out of my hormonal bits.
Right?
No, thank you. I don't know if I like that.
Like, keep your birth control in, even if it means that you don't get a fated mate. Like, it's a really strange situation, but like, because it's a novel, because it's a series, it's, I think 8 women who end up on this planet. Each of them has their own book. That's like book 6, because she's feeling very isolated and very alone, and then all of a sudden she's in love, and some of them are enemies to lovers and some of them are insta love, and he kidnaps her and takes her to this other place, and then they have to come find her, and they're like, you can't do that, so there's always much more conflict because you have so many more characters happening, and all of those situations are different. So I like that one too as a recommendation. I mean, if you've read alien romance, you've probably read Ice Planet Barbarians. It's kind of like the gateway drug of alien romance, but it's got some of these same vibes, but you have more space to explore them, especially since pretty much from about 30% of the first book, you're on the planet. You're off of Earth.
Mm-hmm. So this kind of, as I'm kind of just thinking about like literally, haha, moving parts. Because when I think about like the description of this, like the metaphor they use is like my stocking's been extra stuffed because he's brought two special. You know, I'm not like a huge fan of like sex scenes and erotica again because I can't visualize things like the descriptive detail that usually comes along with eroticas because literally that's the point of the book is challenging for me to engage with just because I can't connect to anything on page. You know, in most scenarios, sure, there's ones that doesn't happen, but like when you start playing around with genitalia, like there's something always interesting to me that my brain starts thinking about, and it's not about the plot line, and it's not even about the logistics of how does this work, like where do things go, what do things touch? Because honestly, I find most genitalia on any gender, any species disgusting. I don't like to think about
really weird looking
at all because it's just like you
yeah.
know, texture and smell and weird, like I start thinking alien fluids, like where are we going with this, like what these, my brain again starts to go in that direction.
I love that this is a sensory processing issue for you.
It very much is. I think for the most part bodies are gross. Bodies creep me out. I don't love extra description of body parts and things moving because I'm like, it's gross to me. But
what do you get out of erotica then if it's not the sex or the bodies?
I honestly, just because I don't read
you
it
don't
that
read
often,
erotica.
because I literally very, very rarely, and even then I can get through like an erotica novel in probably 20 minutes because if you think about it, 90% of it is description of some sort. It's almost like in Lord of the Rings, like, oh, Tom Bombadil is singing about trees for 36 pages. I've never read them because I skipped them. There's just too much description. So that's usually my stumbling block when it comes to erotica. And it, you know, it makes me think of, what is that company, Bad Dragon, who makes the fantasy dildos? They make like oh my god, maybe this is just this is in almost every queer, like not every queer, I'm generalizing and using hyperbole, but you know, there is a sex toy company called Bad Dragon, I think is the name of it, and they are famous for their alien, fantastical, mythical creatures, sleeves, dildos, like all of that. So you can get tentacles, you can get ones with like werewolf knots on them. You can
God, this is amazing.
A demon one.
How have I never seen this?
Y'all should see Meg's face as she has clearly pulled up the website and is browsing.
Wow.
But, you know, and it's always fun to, World of Wangs is in another series. I believe it's a fictional company. But the idea is like, I collect monster sex toys is I've read that in a couple different books.
Okay, I'm shutting this down because I'm lost. There goes my whole day.
There's a rabbit hole y'all will go down if you Google it. Do not Google it in front of children or in public spaces. Apparently they're very well made and it's a popular brand. I don't know what to tell you. But, you know, that's what I start thinking about when I try to get through erotica involving non-humanoid species, that I'm just like, how?
Especially without like something else that you can tie it to, you know, like from a copywriting perspective, you're supposed to engage with an image or a thought that somebody already has in order to make things more understandable and stickier. There's that book Made to Stick by
no pun intended.
Right? I think Chip and Dan something. I don't remember exactly but you know what? I remember recently I was thinking about this book and I Googled, I couldn't remember the name Made to Stick, but I was like, book about the idea that you need to explain something using words that people already know, right? Like that concept was very sticky to me. But like, if you are just taking, you know, human genitalia and being like, but this one has two, without having something to tie it to, that's harder for me, even without, you know, even though I can visualize, I still can't, because I'm like, it just doesn't make sense to me. But if you're like, I mean, we're about to release our Steve Rochelle issue, so I'll just say like, she has a kraken and there are tentacles. I know what tentacles look like. So that's not as hard for me to visualize because I already know, like, oh, it's going to have little suckers on the side. It's going to be a little bit tapered at the end. Yeah. You know, like I can sort of visualize that versus just like, well, that's a weird peen. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it randomly, to me, it comes out too, like when we talk about like conversion copywriting, that we talk about the concept of price anchoring. So don't just say something is like $100 a month. You can say something for the price of a small cup of coffee a day. Right? Because people, you know, they understand what a cup of coffee costs per day. So it's the idea of like taking weird, pricing and linking it to something real that people experience on a day-to-day basis.
So you want
I was
all
like,
of your
cool, I get
romance
price
novels to
fixing.
have banana for scale when it comes to explanations?
Honestly, okay. So, in like biology textbooks, some things they'll say like see figure 1A, and you go to 1A and you're like, it's an apple. Can you imagine if there was like an illustrated appendice to non-human romance novels that not only show genitalia to scale against a banana, but also like they're 7'5". I've never seen a person who is 7'5". I'm 5'1", y'all. I am tiny. I dated someone who was 6'6". That was big enough for me, but I'm just like 7 something. Okay. So I'm just like, here's a movement. Here's my challenge to authors everywhere, y'all.
Illustrators. I think it's illustrators that you're talking to, right?
Illustrators. Go beyond Pinterest boards to show me who your characters are. I want to see banana to scale for all your alien genitalia.
I want illustrators. I want like Lemonade Doodles. We're calling her out. It doesn't have to be her. But if you are an illustrator of monster erotica, do it like not just what this person looks like, but also what they look like with their partner. And then like maybe like a 5'6" woman to scale.
Like, this is the size of a Starbucks venti. Use your imagination. Or they'll use things like the one that I love, especially when it's talking about genitalia, like penis shaped genitalia, is like, it was the width of a Coke can.
Whoa.
And I'm like, well, one, I'm like, okay, cool. I know how big a Coke can is. But then I start thinking the next step, I'm like, that is a Coke can.
Okay, but have you read, what's the Minotaur one? Morning Glory Milking Farm.
No, I've read the summary and I saw someone describe it on TikTok. I won't.
You have to read, Nikki, today.
No.
Because here's the thing about, okay, first of all, the reason I bring it up, the concept of Morning Glory Milking Farm is that it's this multi-species world, paranormal, where there are all different, minotaurs are some of them, but there's also werewolves, there's goblins, there's all these people who live in the same community. And this woman who's a human woman, I think her name's Violet. I'm going to go with Violet. She applies for a job at Morning Glory Milking Farm, where they jerk off minotaurs and then collect the semen and use it in pharmaceutical for basically Viagra, right? That's the concept of it. And the reason I think, and the more that the milkers can collect, the better the collection process is. So they say that they can collect up to 32 ounces in a good pull, which is like a 2-liter bottle. And if they hadn't said ounces, I think I would have been okay. When I read an orc novel and I'm like, wow, that's a lot of semen, I'm like, it's just a lot of semen. But when they put it into ounces, I was like, whoa, that is... But the reason why I think you, Nikki McKnight, should read it is that their hiring and operations onboarding is on point. The whole thing starts before she even steps into Morning Glory Milking Farm. They have a welcome video where they show the process. They have very specific checklists that they follow with every single visitor. They have a clear customer service. They have a customer loyalty. Like, their operations is perfect. They definitely have a color-coded filing system. No? It's too much?
You know what? No. I'm feeling ill in my stomach right now as soon as you told me how many ounces that was.
It's back to being a sensory thing for you. Okay, I respect that. I respect it.
Yeah, I feel like sensory things just in general for me involving bodies. I'm like, no. I don't. No. No, thank you.
Okay, we've got off the rails. Very surprised. Any final thoughts on An Alien Mate for Christmas?
So I think for this one specifically, I do like the novella structure. I think Melody Beckett does a really good, again, I'm calling it the improv structure of just like yes and. Like, the point is not necessarily the nuance in the journey. It's more like I'm going to get you what you want. So like, it's fun in that sense. I do like how, because I like backstory, I like world building. So as small as it was, this leopard purple alien race, I did like the backstory. I like how they put Kitty into this situation where really like the idea of jaunting off to an alien planet to be this alien's mate doesn't sound completely weird. I would though like to check in with her like 2 weeks into this journey, going, "You still good? You still
I
good?"
mean,
Because you made
epilogue
you did
seemed
not
okay.
you did not sleep on this decision. Yeah, like I think it's 2 years later. They are on this planet. She is pregnant with their child, and they seem happy. But overall, like it's fun. It's just fun. It's frothy. There's some, for those who like extra appendages and more sex scenes, like I'm sure you'll love it. It's not personally for me, but it is
It's a
fun.
good little
It's just a
cupcake.
nice quick jaunt.
It's a delicious little
Yeah,
tiny
it's a good
cupcake.
cupcake. I read it in about 45 minutes, so it was nice. It was a nice and easy read while I was making dinner the other day. So yeah, super fun. Meg, what about you?
I really liked it. Again, same basic vibe of like this was a nice, easy read. Sometimes you need a palate cleanser, especially like if I just finished like a big Amy Jimenez book or like Christina, like some of the heavier, like if I read a Kennedy Ryan that just like destroyed me, like broke my heart into 1,000 tiny pieces, then I might go for an Alien Made for Christmas because I'd be like, you know what? I know exactly what to expect. I'm going to get my cupcake. It's going to taste really sweet and it'll be like that palate cleanser. So if you're in sort of like a writing slump and you just need something quick to kick you back out of it, you don't have to think about it very hard, but you enjoy every minute of it, I would suggest an Alien Made for Christmas.
Awesome. As for other recommendations, I did mention the Star Marked Warrior series by Sam Burns and W.M. Fawkes. I did really like that one. Another one would be Coluvia's Royalty series by Alexandra Hazard. So the first book in the series involves an alien prince going to Earth, and he kind of disguises himself as a human for a period of time. Eventually, he does take the human back to his planet, and then the rest of the series pretty much involves cultures and like warring alien cultures. So there's not as many humans in it outside of that first one, but still, pretty fun. We've talked about on the show before. Earth Boys Are Easy by C. Rochelle. We do talk about that book even more in our interview with her. Skin suits. We got real on board with skin suits real quick,
real
in that
fast.
one, so that was fun. Another one that I love is the Monstrous series by Lily Mayne.
I love
Granted,
this one.
it's not quite alien. It does take place on Earth. It's more interdimensional beings. Many years ago, before the start of the series, a rift opened up and monsters came onto Earth. It is one of the very first monstrous books I read, where essentially, yeah, these are different creatures with different appendages, and how are humans navigating that? I think it's probably one of the first ones I ever read. It's a great series.
And you
and I
know
think
what I love
lastly,
about that series also, just to tap into that recommendation, is it's very dystopian. It's in like a militaristic dystopian world. And I liked the communities that were built among these rebels. But there was a like legitimate amount of fear of the monsters who came from another world. And one of the things that I love about monster romance, so this is monster / alien, I would say, is like the ties to the way that racism appears in cultures and prejudice appears in cultures, and the ways that those heroes overcame all of those prejudices in a world where like half those guys are military or former military and they've been hunting these creatures. And I love the conflict of that and the inner and there's like cults, there's so much world building in this series. I adore the Monstrous series.
Yeah, it's really good.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say last, it doesn't have aliens, but it's space. So if you just want sci-fi, Blind Space by Marie Sexton, an early book I read. It's so good. It has space pirates.
Yeah.
And most of it takes place on a spaceship. So if you like a space romance, I highly recommend Blind Space by Marie Sexton. It actually won best gay sci-fi fantasy at the Rainbow Awards in 2012. So it's older. It's over 10 years old now. But yeah, if you just want space, Blind Space, Marie Sexton, highly recommend. Meg, what other ones do you have on your list for aliens or spacey type things?
Okay, we'll start with spacey, which I love the Prison Planet series by Emmy Chandler. It starts with Guardians. Guardians singular. It is all humans, but it's set in space, and it is a prison planet, right? So it's a 4-book series, and every single one of them has some sort of, these people have been condemned in some way. And the first book is they're in a Thunderdome situation, and there are these rabid dogs that are coming to kill them, and they have to team up in order, almost like Hunger Gamesy, but also it's being broadcast back to planet Earth. These are all almost like the way that a couple hundred years ago colonialist British would just send people to Australia. Instead, they're sending them to
Mhm.
these planets in space, where they're competing against each other, and then there are champions, and there are, so it's this
Mhm.
entire, like, they're all male females, they're all MFs, but they're supporting each other and building out this life together. And so you get some of that, like, almost Ice Planet idea of, women who are being delivered on a spaceship, and what is it that they're going to do, and they're probably going to be, servicing the gentlemen who are watching the games, but if they act out,
Mhm.
then they get sent into the arena. So it's very dark, very dystopian, but I really like that one. It's still an HEA, even if it's a weird HEA
Mhm.
of them, escaping from this Thunderdome and going out into the world. Another one that's very similar to that in tone is Hold by Claire Kent. It's also a prison planet, but everything is inside the prison. There isn't a much larger world. And so the first line of it is like, find the strongest man and let him protect you. So she's, dropped into this prison on a completely different planet, and I think it's mostly humans, but there may be some extraterrestrials. But she has to navigate living in a prison with a protector, and she, who does she choose, and why does she choose him?
Hmm.
So that's, as opposed to like a why choose, this is like, why does she choose him? Because they're often like the grumpiest alpha-iest heroes who end up becoming the saviors. But it's very dark. Another one that I really loved that is some human, some alien is the Planet of Desire series by Robin Lovett. Uh, that episode of Arrested Development where Job's like suggesting different housing things, and he's like, "This one's called Fuck Island." Um, this is this is basically that. So,
That's very visceral. I like
right,
it.
there are these space travelers. It's in the future. They're space travelers. They crash land onto a planet, and the air of that planet is an aphrodisiac. And if you don't have sex, you die. But the only people to have sex with are the inhabitants of that planet, who are an alien species. So it's like alien erotica, but also has some weird dystopian plot lines. And you're
Oh.
also exploring the culture of this planet, which is very much like a free love society versus this much more conservative human approach to it. So I love that, like, intermixing of cultures and like deconstruction of these norms that we place on each other about what is appropriate for sex. Was really interesting. And then I have one more author, 3 recommendations from her. Her name's Amanda Milo. The first one I read with her is Contagion, which is an alien who has crash landed on Earth and has severe OCD and is very concerned about all the
Hmm.
germs on this planet. It is one of the funniest books I've read, because he's just so like everyone's afraid of him, but he's like, you don't touch me, you're so germy. Like he's very, like, he wants to stay in his
Yeah.
spacesuit, not because he just doesn't want anybody to touch him. And so his heroine is like very sweet with him and takes care of his OCD. It's like a really beautiful alien mental health HEA. And then I went back in time and I read the prequel to it, which was Contaminated, which is about why the original character left the planet to go find his mate. This is somebody who is a scientist who goes to this planet to find a specific plant, and she finds it and she falls in love with the person who is already studying it. And then loved that. Again, super funny. A little bit of a Beauty and the Beast retelling with them too, which I really loved. And my last recommendation, which brings us full circle, is Amanda Milo's An Alien Nanny for Christmas. When when I picked
Oh.
up An Alien Mate for Christmas, I expected something very similar to An Alien Nanny for Christmas, which may have been why I was like, why is there so much world building if he's just going to move to Earth? Because the Alien Nanny for Christmas is, he appears in her backyard, and she's a single mother of 2, and she doesn't have childcare, and she's like, oh, I can't just leave my little one home alone. Can you just watch my kids for the day while I get this sorted out? And so he becomes the nanny and he stays in the house, and that's how he's able to work. And he makes, and like, what human woman in the 20th first century doesn't want this, just to have like an alien appear and make her meals and watch her kids and sexually satisfy her, right? Like, it's a dream. But especially as a parent, I was like, no, this is what I want. I want a really well hung alien to arrive in my backyard, make all my meals, clean my house, right? Like, this is what I want for Christmas. Sorry, husband. I love you. Thank you for doing all my. But like, if I didn't have that, this would be the dream. And then, they figure out a way for him to become a part of their family. And like, actually a very nice, like, found family, heartwarming, supportive situation. So it's very different from Alien Mate for Christmas, where she's like, fuck all of y'all, I'm off. This is integration versus escape.
Ooh, okay. Well, some great recommendations there. We'll link them all in the show notes for you. Get yourself some alien space love. Have a good time. All right. Before we head up into our wrap up question, a few gentle reminders. Support podcasters, support creators you love by rate, reviewing, and subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from. Check us out on Substack. Subscribe there to get all of our beautiful full show notes and recommendations. Follow us on social media at First Dates and Soulmates. We'd love to hear what you think about the show. Share your thoughts on alien genitalia, and does it creep you out as much as it creeps me out? Comment on Substack. You can have a conversation with there or on any of our social media platforms. We appreciate all of you for listening. So let's head into our wrap-up question. Meg, who or what are you shipping this week?
I am shipping Billy Joel.
Okay, tell me more.
Okay.
He didn't start the fire, but maybe he did.
Maybe he did. He never really answered that within there. Who did start the fire is a good question. So I, as we shared in last week's episode, I'm working on a novel right now that is two musicians who are connected through their music. One of them is a 36-year-old woman, so I feel like I have a very strong idea. She's only a couple years younger than me, so I have a strong idea of like what are the things that she would listen to. But the other character is 26 years old. He grew up in Queens. He's Dominican, right? Like, I don't necessarily have the lived experience of what music he would listen to. And so this past weekend, my elder son went to summer camp, and my husband and I were driving out, and we put on the Spotify playlist that was just like summer nostalgia. And it was like everything from the 50s until like Nelly Hot and Her, right? Like, it was all over the place. Like, not even modern. It was all at least 20 years old. And I was explaining to my husband while on this drive, I was like, I'm really struggling with this character and what his music choices are, because I don't have the lived experience of what somebody 15 years younger than me would be listening to. The closest I have is like my nephew who plays football and lives in Wisconsin, like not a direct, right? But he also has access to all this music. Like, modern 20 somethings have everything at their fingertips because of Spotify and Apple Music. Like, they can listen to anything. So should I be concerned about whether or not he knows particular songs? And the song in particular that I was telling my husband about is like, I have this, woman character who's a pianist, and Cruz says to her, don't you ever rebel? Didn't you ever play Elton John or Billy Joel? I mean, you would really kick ass at the song Vienna. And I was saying to my husband, Ben, I'm like, would he even know that song? Like, it's like a guide, but like, it would be a perfect song for the scenario. Would he know the song Vienna? And so we drive for an hour to the Finger Lakes, and we go to pick up my son, and we park, and we walk up to cabin C1. And would you believe the song that's fucking playing through the speakers, Nikki? What do you think it was?
Was it Billy Joel?
It was Vienna by Billy Joel, played by my son's 22-year-old camp counselor. And I looked at this kid and I'm like, I didn't think that you would know this song. Like, this is from like 1977. How do you know this? And he was like, well, I turned on Moving Out, and then Spotify just played the next song. And I was like, oh, thank you.
Validation.
Like, I don't have to stress over it. Like, this 22-year-old just made my point for me. And if anyone is reading my book in 6 months and they're like, this character would not know Vienna by Billy Joel, I will point them back to that camp counselor and be like, Ray know it.
I like it. You know what? Solved a lot of problems for you. There you go.
Thank you, Billy Joel. I am shipping you and your entire oeuvre of your catalog that is available on Spotify. Maybe I should. Oh no, maybe I
Very
should
well
ship
done.
Spotify. So Nikki, what are you shipping this week?
I am shipping an Amazon Prime TV show that I am freaking loving. It's called My Lady Jane. And Meg, if you haven't watched this, I think you would
Oh,
really
I
enjoy
haven't.
it. So it's a British historical fantasy. So it takes Lady Jane Grey, like the 9 Days Queen from the time of like Henry VIII, but it's a fantasy version of it. So it takes place 16th century. Lady Jane Grey, who is cousin to the king, is coerced by her family to marry like Lord Dudley in line of the throne. So in real life, this is after Henry VIII died, and you have basically Elizabeth and Mary
Mhm.
are kind of, this is when their kind of war begins over who's going to be taking the throne. Surprise, it's Elizabeth who ends up winning that one. But in between the death and in between them kind of taking over the throne and Mary eventually being executed, Lady Jane Grey was queen for 9 days, and then she is beheaded as a traitor in real life. But this is a fantasy version. So she's there. The England that this is set in has a race called Ethians, who are they transform into animals, and they are seen as like lesser than the ordinary humans, who are called Verity, are trying to drive the Ethians out of society and kill them. So in and amongst like the political intrigue of the king is ill. It's Edward the Sixth who's on the throne, and he's ill. Small spoiler: you find this out very early on. He's being poisoned
Mm.
by Mary, who wants to take the throne, but she's really close to him. She is promised to Lord Dudley, who she thinks is an asshole. Turns out that's his brother. Anyway, so it's like this kind of historical fantasy. It's very funny because Lady Jane Grey is very much like a modern day feminist. She's like, I don't want to get married. I want to continue to study botany and find plants that will cure and help people. It's got like some modernized speech. Like, it's very much not historically accurate. It's very, very fun. It's 8 episodes on Amazon Prime. It just came out like a couple weeks ago. It came out at the end of June, so it's very new. They haven't confirmed a season 2 yet. I'm hoping that there will be a season 2. It was very enjoyable. If you ever watched the movie Rosaline that came out in 2022, it was like Romeo and Juliet from Rosaline's perspective,
Ooh.
Rosaline being the character that Romeo dumps. It's fucking hilarious. It was on like Hulu in the States. I think it's on Disney Plus. Everywhere else might be on Disney in the US. But Rosaline was the same thing. It was very much like a modern persona. It was Caitlin Dever, who played Rosaline. It's hilarious. It's very funny. It's kind of got that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead vibe of when they're not on stage with Hamlet, they are nowhere. So it's like kind of like Rosaline, Romeo and Juliet is happening in the back of the movie, and she's like, these fucking idiots. So My Lady Jane has very similar vibes to Rosaline. Also, if you haven't seen Rosaline, highly recommend that as a film. It is hilarious. It's very well done. But I'm definitely shipping My Lady Jane. Great series. Very easy to watch. 8 episodes. I think I watched it over the course of like 2 evenings on my couch. Very, very fun. Highly recommend.
Thank you for that recommendation. I will go check it out. And everyone, if you are looking for these recommendations, we will make sure that they're in the show notes so you can click right through. If you haven't already, please rate and review the episode. Follow us on Instagram, on TikTok, on Substack, so that way you can catch it. And while you're there, share with a friend, because this is always a great way to share what you're loving and, spread the word of First Dates and Soulmates. We will be back next week in our interview with Rochelle to talk all about her villainous series, Earth Boys Are Easy, the mythical monsters, monstrous mythicals.
Yeah. Basically, there's going to be a lot of weird genitalia and aliens and just chaotic plot gremlins that we dive into. It's a really fun episode.
It's a super fun episode. See you then.